Listen now to A Liberty Minute with William Grigg, author of such books as The Gospel of Revolt, Feminism versus the Family, and Freedom on the Altar, the UN's Crusade Against God and Family.
Lester and Mary Smith of Philo, California suffer from heart disease, emphysema, and other afflictions. Under state and county law, the elderly couple is entitled to grow and use marijuana to relieve their chronic pain. Nevertheless, on September 24th, a belligerent party of Mendocino County Sheriff's deputies raided the Smith home. They seized 17 plants and the couple's combined life savings of roughly $81,000, which they kept in a vault in their house. The couple was left with their Social Security checks and $600 they receive in rent each month from their children. Neither Lester nor Mary has been formally charged with the crime. They won't be able to challenge the seizure of their money in court until next March. Thanks to the so-called war on drugs, it's perfectly legal for a local sheriff to rob an innocent, sick, elderly couple of everything they've saved. Let us take back the liberty wherewith Christ has made us free.
Will Grigg is editor-at-large for The Right Source, an internet news service at rightsourceonline.com. Join us next time for A Liberty Minute with Will Grigg.
Onward, Christian soldiers, marching us to war.
Greetings, John Lofton, recovering Republican here, trying also to recover from one of the most depressing and disappointing interviews I've ever heard about anything. A recent interview of American Vision's Gary DeMar, who says he's voting for John McCain. How in the world can Gary do this since his ministry teaches a Christian biblical worldview, which Senator McCain does not have, is beyond me. In any event, today you will hear Gary's case and my response to it right now here on The American View, a program that does have a Christian biblical constitutional worldview. Stay tuned, please. All right. Hello. How are you? John Lofton here. I am the co-host of The American View. That's the radio show that you're listening to. This is the program that believes that the people who founded our country in the early 1600s actually had a view. They intended something. You might call them the purpose-driven Puritans. Their view was, number one, there is an almighty, everlasting, omniscient God, the God of the Bible, who is active in the affairs of men. Number two, our rights, including our right to life, liberty, and property, come from him, the God of the Bible, the only God there is. And number three, it is the duty of civil government to secure, protect, and defend God-given rights, to acknowledge God, the God of the Bible, to glorify him and make him known, and when civil government becomes destructive of these God-given purposes, it is our duty to alter or to abolish such government. This program is a painful program for me because I have known Gary DeMar for over 30 years. His American Vision ministry has done much excellent work distributing much excellent, solidly biblical information regarding the necessity of a Christian biblical worldview to rebuild our country and return it to its Christian roots. In fact, on its website, on the website of the American Vision, the headline is up top, which says, quote, "Restoring America's Biblical Foundation from Genesis to Revelation." It is noted on this site that America is losing its biblical foundation. Christians have lost their vision for the future, his site says. And he has another headline there. The Bible must be believed and applied from Genesis to Revelation. It says that America's foundation can be restored when we teach Americans to believe the whole Bible from cover to cover and apply it to all areas of life. Well, amen. And the vision that's stated on the American Vision website is as follows: an America that recognizes the sovereignty of God over all of life and where Christians apply a biblical worldview to every facet of society. This future America will be a city on a hill, that's from the book of Matthew, drawing all nations to the Lord Jesus Christ and teaching them to subdue the earth for the advancement of his kingdom. Well, it's because this is the vision of American Vision that I was so shocked, truly shocked. I don't shock easily, but I was shocked to hear a recent interview of Gary DeMar on a program hosted by OPC, Orthodox Presbyterian Church pastor Kevin Swanson. His radio show is called Generations Radio, and in that interview, excerpts of which you will hear, Gary DeMar endorses John McCain, who, whatever else John McCain has, he does not have a Christian biblical worldview. So let's go right to those excerpts. By the way, you can go to our website, theamericanview.com, theamericanview.com, and in our forum, we have the link posted to this entire interview, which you can hear. But we're going to hear about 34 excerpts of what Gary had to say here, and then I will comment on them, and I'll try to be patient, because this, as I said, is very painful. All right, let's start off with the first one. Here's one of the things that Gary said.
Well, it's obvious that our choices for candidates is not that great. And of course, although I think one is better than the other,
All right. This is alarming right away, because it's obvious that Gary is going to do the lesser of the two evils. He's going to do it. I just knew he was when I heard this. He has been frightened by what we call boogeyman politics. And boogeyman politics, which is based on fear, which is not a fruit of the Christian spirit, by the way. Boogeyman politics says, hey, look, our guy basically, okay, he stinks, all right, but the other guy really stinks. He is really bad, and he'll do a lot more evil things. The boogeyman politics is, something's going bump in the night out there, and you got to hold your nose and vote for the guy who stinks less. All right, well, and then Gary went on to tell us why he thinks John McCain is better.
when you get John McCain, you also get a group of House and Republican leaders as well that can either stop legislation, put an emphasis on things. The president generally has a bully pulpit.
The bully pulpit. Well, now, this is truly inexplicable, and we have had Republicans running the country. We've had a Republican president, and Republicans have given us the most ungodly, unconstitutional, intrusive, debt-ridden government in our history. I mean, John McCain, who Gary says he endorses, voted for, and this is just recent things that he's done. He voted for this $800 billion so-called bailout. He voted for an $85 billion bailout of the AIG, massive insurance company, and he voted for a $25 billion loan guarantee for the auto industry. He also voted for 4 of the 5 Bush budgets. So I truly do not understand this idea that, the president, we have to have a Republican Congress, because evidently Gary thinks that's good. I don't get it. Here's something else Gary said. He raised, of course, the specter of bad Supreme Court nominees by Obama.
Of course, the wild card in all this is going to be the Supreme Court nomination. If you get a Democrat president in there and if changes take place at the House and the Senate level, you may have a veto-proof president coming up here, and the Republicans won't be able to do anything to stop it.
Okay. Oh, boy. All right, stay calm. Stay calm. Republicans gave us most of the judges on the Supreme Court that ruled in the Roe v. Wade cases. That's right. Republican-appointed Supreme Court justices gave us Roe v. Wade. How could Gary possibly continue to believe that when Republicans appoint Supreme Court justices, they're going to be good? That's nonsense. And John McCain voted to confirm Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Yes, and for Justice Breyer. And McCain has made it absolutely clear repeatedly that he, John McCain, as president, would have no pro-life litmus test. So this is truly a mystery, how someone right now, today, after all the things that have been done, that Republicans, that they hold out some hope for better Supreme Court nominees. That's just, it's nonsense. Okay. And then Gary invoked his idea of reality.
And the realities are we're going to get one of these two guys.
Well, I agree it looks that way, but why does it necessarily follow that we have to vote for one of these two guys as Christians? We don't. That's nonsense. We do not have to vote for one of the two guys simply because they are there. I don't understand Christians who who seem to think that they are compelled to maneuver within the choice of the world. It's like the world sets the table, gives us the menu, and quite frankly, from a Christian biblical worldview point of view, which Gary supposedly holds, we're supposed to choose from the menu that the world gives us. No, we don't. I read in the book of Daniel where Daniel would not eat the king's meat, and we shouldn't eat the king's meat either. Yeah, it's probably going to be one of these two guys, but it does not follow that, therefore, we must choose one of these two guys. And Gary says this about third-party possibilities and third-party people.
I know that the third-party people are saying, look, neither one of these guys is good. We need to go with the third party. That's okay if a third-party candidate had a real shot at doing something, but at this point in political reality time, that's just not the case.
Well, there's an interesting phrase. If ever there was an oxymoron, it is political reality. In other words, let the politicians determine the reality. Well, no, look, there's only one reality. It's God's reality. And it is manifest in every area of life, including politics. So the idea that there's some kind of political reality, well, once again, what you see in that answer is the idea that the politicians set the table and we must eat. We must eat what they serve us. Well, no. There's only one reality, as I say, it's God's, and God has told us the qualifications for people who are to hold His ordained public office, and we're going to get to that too. Political reality, how about that? All right, Gary, then the boogeyman. The boogeyman makes his appearance. Boogie person, I guess, to be politically correct. The boogie person shows up, and here's what Gary said about that.
Well, there's no doubt that the Democrats are going to push for a much more intrusive national government than we've ever had before. And my guess is that we really don't know how bad it's going to be because Barack Obama hasn't said much about his socialist agenda, but he is a socialist through and through.
Oh, my. Look, most of the people in both political parties are socialists. In some ways, they're even communists. Seriously. Have you ever looked at the Communist Manifesto, the 10 things that were called for by Karl Marx and by Frederick Engels? It was a progressive graduated income tax, free public education. Just go down the list. And McCain and Obama believe in all of them. But there's the boogeyman. Oh, Obama, you believe that? How could Gary say this with a straight face, which I assume he did. He was on the radio. I couldn't see his face. But, oh, the Democrats are going to give us big government, intrusive government. I'm not sure they could. You know what? It reminded me of that by Gary. Every once in a while you read in the newspaper where on a Pacific island some Japanese soldier comes out of a cave 63 years after the war is over, and he still thinks the war is going on. He hadn't heard any news. He doesn't know anything that's up to date. But to try to scare people into voting for McCain because Obama's going to give us big government, please. I'm not sure Obama and his administration could give us a bigger, more ungodly, more unconstitutional, more intrusive government than has been given to us by George Bush. Seriously. And Gary continues in this boogeyman fear. He's worried about President Obama's appointments. Here's what he says.
So we don't know what his cabinet's going to be like. We don't know all the hundreds and hundreds of people who are going to be his advisors, and how they'll come in there and try to push all of this stuff. And who knows? We may you and I might not be on the radio, given their plans to push for this so-called fairness doctrine.
Well, I got to be honest. If Gary's pushing John McCain and going to do things similar to this, I don't want him on the radio. Seriously, worried about. Notice he says we don't really know what Obama's going to do, but I'm afraid. You know, it's something going bump in the night out there. The boogeyman has great power, although he should have no power over Christians. Yes, onward Christian soldiers. Yeah. We're in a war, and we need to fight it in God's armor. All right, we're going to take our first break here. Don't go away. We're going to continue this depressing interview of Gary DeMar. Stay tuned, please.
Listen now to A Liberty Minute with William Grigg, author of such books as The Gospel of Revolt, Feminism versus the Family, and Freedom on the Altar, the UN's Crusade Against God and Family.
Venezuelan ruler Hugo Chavez is an unabashed proponent of Marxism. Like his mentor and role model, the aging Cuban despot Fidel Castro, Chavez has worked to centralize control over his oil-rich nation's economy. This despicable record gives Chavez a certain ironic credibility when he describes the Bush administration's response to the banking crisis as socialist in nature. The Bush administration's reaction to the credit freeze was to confiscate hundreds of billions of dollars in wealth from the general public for redistribution to wealthy investment firms on Wall Street. Just last week, Henry Paulson, whose title is Secretary of the Treasury, but whose powers are those of a dictator, effectively nationalized 9 of the country's largest banks. Speaking shortly after these developments, Chavez gloatingly observed that, quote, "Comrade Bush is to the left of me now. Whatever one thinks of the source, that assessment is tragically correct. Let us take back the liberty wherewith Christ has made us free."
Will Grigg is editor-at-large for The Right Source, an internet news service at rightsourceonline.com. Join us next time for A Liberty Minute with Will Grigg.
All right, welcome back. John Lofton here, co-host of The American View. That's what you're listening to, The American View. And I'm commenting on some excerpts from an interview of Gary DeMar, who heads up American Vision, and I'm trying to do it patiently and calmly, although it's hard. DeMar, at one point in the interview, is asked, well, what does John McCain have to do? Remember, DeMar has endorsed John McCain.
Well, I think McCain needs to do what people have been crying for him to do, is to get back to a conservative base. I don't see him as a stalwart for Christian values, but he has been pretty clearly against abortion.
Well, that's just not true. He's not been a stalwart against abortion. He favors exceptions in the case of rape and incest and life of the mother and health of the mother. And he's made clear that he has no pro-life litmus test for judges. He's voted for millions and millions and millions of dollars to be given to Planned Parenthood. John McCain is for federally funded embryonic stem cell research. He thinks states should decide on whether or not babies should be murdered in the womb. And he actually wanted Joseph Lieberman as his vice president, but decided against that. Lieberman, of course, was even for partial birth abortion. So it's just false to in any way say that McCain is pro-life. Then DeMar says this about McCain's record on spending.
He does want to rein in spending.
Oh, please, please, please. Again, he voted for the $800 billion bailout. He voted for the AIG insurance company $85 billion bailout, and he voted for a $25 billion loan guarantee for the auto industry. That's ridiculous to say that McCain wants to rein in spending. Gary also said this about the necessity to have candidates who obey the Constitution. How about this one?
We need to get people to be running who understand the constitutional limitations on governmental power.
Well, amen, but John McCain is not one of those people. Again, he's voted for all those bailouts, which are unconstitutional. He's for the two wars, the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War. They're unconstitutional. They're undeclared. McCain's health care proposals, his plans for education, and the list could go on. And McCain-Feingold, his campaign reform, they're all unconstitutional. In fact, when this issue was raised on the Imus in the Morning show, McCain said that he would much rather have clean politics than obey the First Amendment. Amazing. He also, his interviewer asked DeMar this excellent question.
Okay, so I walk into that ballot box on Election Day. What's my responsibility as a Christian before God, Gary?
Well, of course, the obvious answer is to obey God. God sets qualifications for leaders. They must be men. They must be godly men, knowledgeable men. They must be from among the people. And they must fear God. That does not describe John McCain. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. He has no Christian biblical world view. Gary went on to say this. Okay.
And the arguments of the lesser of the two evils, but you've got to deal with realities as they are.
Why is it a reality that we have to choose the lesser of two evils? I want to hear that. Why do we ever have to choose any kind of evil? That's ridiculous. It's just, again, there's only one reality, and it's God's. And it's nowhere does God tell us we have to choose the lesser of two evils. And he again invoked political reality.
when someone says the lesser of two evils, it's really the lesser of three, lesser of four, lesser of five evils. But look, I'm dealing with political reality here. These are the only two options we've got at the moment.
Now, really, that on its face is totally asinine. That it's the only two options. No, you have the option not to vote. It's not a sin not to vote. We do not have to choose between the lesser of two evils. Then he talks about the Democrats and Republicans.
To be that way, but if you're going to really talk about turning government around, it's a lot of hard work. The Republicans and the Democrats are where they are today is because they worked at it. There was no miracle. Nothing dropped out of the sky for them. They worked at it.
Republicans and Democrats are where they are today. In other words, two bankrupt, corrupt political parties because Christians, conservative Christian individuals and organizations have been Republican Party cheerleaders first. They have not been Christians. That's why we have a Republican Party that elected George Bush, who has given us the most ungodly, unconstitutional, intrusive, debt-ridden government in the history of the universe. Oh, no, those Christian conservatives, so-called, they worked very hard. They worked very hard for a person who turned out to be anything but a Christian in his political views. But Christians don't want to work, DeMar's says. He says this.
Christians don't want to really believe that it can be done, number one, and number two, they don't want to put the hard work behind it. So instead, they'll vote for somebody who has had no political experience at all. Why is it these guys running for president haven't won a local election?
There isn't one verse in the Bible which says that the qualifications for a godly, good ruler, that one of the qualifications is that he must have held, and it must be a he, by the way, that he must have held some previous political office or ruler office. God talks about, among other things, the good ruler must have wisdom. It says nothing about having previous experience in the equivalent in Bible times of the political office. And again, Christians did work very hard. They worked very hard for non-Christian candidates, and they elected one. And when I say non-Christian, Bush non-Christian, McCain non-Christian, I don't mean if they drop dead right now that they wouldn't go to heaven. I'm not talking about their salvation. I'm saying they have no Christian understanding of what God requires of them in their civil government offices. They have no godly, biblical Christian view of government. And anyone who denies that has to show me, well, where had they done anything Christian with the government? And they haven't. All right, we got to take another break here on The American View. That is the program you're listening to right now, The American View. We have a website, theamericanview.com, theamericanview.com. Or you could email me, JLOF, as in Frank, JLOF at AOL.com. Stay tuned, please. We've got a lot of program left.
Listen now to A Liberty Minute with William Grigg, author of such books as The Gospel of Revolt, Feminism versus the Family, and Freedom on the Altar, the UN's Crusade Against God and Family.
Those with school-age children who may be assigned to write Halloween-themed short stories should be warned that displaying exceptional creativity could result in criminal charges under school zero-tolerance policies. William Poole, a teenager from Lexington, Kentucky, was arrested after his grandparents discovered what they thought was a plan for a killing spree. Poole explained that what had been discovered was a fictional story that he had reviewed with an English teacher. However, Poole was charged with second-degree terroristic threatening. Released on bail, Poole was later arrested and jailed for contempt of court when he visited a grade school to bring his sister home. As investigators failed to turn up proof of a plot, the prosecution refined the charge to attempted terroristic threatening, which is not an actual crime. Nevertheless, Poole was given 2 years of restrictive probation for doing nothing. The government ruling us is more terrifying than any Halloween story a child could conceive. Let us take back the liberty wherewith Christ has made us free.
Will Grigg is editor-at-large for The Right Source, an internet news service at rightsourceonline.com. Join us next time for A Liberty Minute with Will Grigg.
All right, welcome back. John Lofton here, co-host of The American View. Let's go back to that interview Gary DeMar gave recently and my commenting on some of the things he said. Gary is the head of American Vision, and sad to say he has endorsed John McCain.
If you can't take over the Republican Party or the Democrat Party, whatever the case might be, if you can't take over one of these parties, what makes you think you're going to start a third party in order to compete with one of these parties? Why reinvent the wheel? Why not go in and develop a strategy to take over the Republican Party or the Democrat Party?
Well, once again, with all due respect, I wonder where Gary has been. Been there, done that. That was the strategy of conservatives right after the Goldwater defeat 44 years ago, to take over the Republican Party. Well, the conservatives took over the Republican Party. Most of those conservatives, of course, also claim to be Christian. And what is the result? The result is the presidency of George Bush. So forget that. Been there, done that. He's given us the biggest government ever. Also, then there was this exchange about strategy and tactics between Gary and Kevin Swanson.
So what you're saying is our battle are the primary battles. In other words, if we're going to be in this race, all of our energies really need to be put into the primary battles. And if we lost the primary battles, take your marbles, go home, and come back in 2 years.
Exactly. I used the Little League World Series analogy. Look, if you want to get your team in the Little League World Series, you got to follow the rules. You can get your neighborhood team together and go up there and knock on the stadium door and say, we want to compete, and say, wait a minute, if you want to compete, this is what you have to do. We know what it takes to compete.
Well, I don't think he does. This life is not a game of marbles. It's not a Little League baseball game. Life is governed by God and His Word, and we are to obey God and His Word and seek men for public office who have the qualifications that God says they must have. And then Gary refers to the election of Ronald Reagan.
You think about what we were able to pull off in the 1980 election when Ronald Reagan came in.
Well, I know a lot of conservative Christians think that Reagan walked on water. He did not. From a biblical Christian perspective, he was a failure. He left office with the government much bigger, taxes higher, and more debt. So there. After Reagan, he says Christians gave up.
But after that election, Christians said, well, okay, we won this one, so we're finished. But we kind of let it go for a while, but then in 1994, 1996, we came back and took over the House and the Senate. We give up too soon. The liberals never give up. They're always pushing, and we don't do that. We don't want to get in there and continue to fight.
Well, I'm not sure who Gary means when he refers to we. I'm not sure about that. The problem is not giving up, but that Christians, for the most part, the conservatives, have not fought the political battle in the full armor of God. They've fought in Saul's armor, and they have lost. And then, finally, there's one encouraging answer given by Gary.
All right, back to the ballot box, though. Is there a point at which you just don't vote for the two evils, all right? I mean, you've got two major evils running, Hitler and Stalin running against each other. One's going to kill 6 million, the other's going to kill 20 million. If you're voting by body count, at that point, are you just being too pragmatic?
Well, I think if those are my options, there's probably no way you could vote for either one of the guys.
Right.
Okay, so if Hitler and Stalin are ever on the ballot, we don't have to vote. That's very encouraging. He also alludes again to McCain's non-existent pro-life record.
McCain has been fairly consistent on the pro-life issue.
Okay.
No, he is not, and I told you why earlier. Gary also alludes to his own plan.
But if you're really serious about this, you really want to change the political landscape, then there needs to be a broader, longer political strategy. Now, I've got one outlined, but again, will Christians really want to be involved at the level that I'm suggesting and what will need to take place in order to pull this off?
Well, no, I, as one Christian, want no part of Gary's strategy, which obviously includes voting for John McCain to bring about change. What? Gary was asked a very serious question by Kevin and whether or not he thought McCain fears God.
Okay, gut feel, Gary, you think John McCain fears God?
I believe he does. I do.
Are you pretty confident that John McCain is going to do something that will represent something good for this country?
I think it's possible.
Do you think he's better than George W. Bush was as a candidate 8 years ago?
boy, this war thing really. I was so disenchanted with George Bush going to war.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that John McCain is kind of in that same perspective.
Yeah, McCain's kind of in that perspective, having said at one point that he didn't care if we were in Iraq for 100 years. But Gary says he hopes that McCain is more restrained.
I'm hoping that John McCain is a little more judicious. I mean, he was the guy who pushed for the surge, and that was the right thing to do at the time, even though what George Bush did in going to war I thought was the wrong decision. I think what John McCain suggested in terms of a surge, if you're going to fight a war, you better fight it the right way.
No. Bad war, bad surge, bad everything. Get out. And the idea that McCain would be more restrained is nonsense. He's a warmonger. He wants to spread democracy all over the world by force if necessary. Then there was this exchange about America becoming more socialist.
Yeah. I just think there's a rising disillusionment among a lot of conservative Christians, Gary. America just seems to be more socialist than she was 8 years ago.
Oh, I agree. There is absolutely no doubt about it. And the Republicans, I've been so disappointed in Republicans who did not, who again, I think are ignorant. They don't know how economics works.
Well, so Republicans are ignorant, so vote for McCain. That one, well, all of them I don't get. All right, then Gary criticizes certain economic views.
Who am I to take from some guy who makes more money than I do? Why should I vote for a guy who's going to tax a guy to give me money? That's not right. Mm-hmm. I think most Americans would understand that, and John McCain, of course, I don't think has articulated that very well.
Yeah.
So Gary admits that John McCain hasn't articulated the economic issue very well, but hey, vote for McCain anyway. No, I would say it's an understatement of the century to say that McCain hasn't done well on the economic issue, voting for all those unconstitutional bailouts. And, oh boy, I tell you, it's just depressing. Anyway, the subject of Sarah Palin comes up.
Now, it seems to me that Palin added a lot more vision to the campaign than McCain had.
Well, I agree.
Well, you don't have to have much more vision to have more vision than McCain. But yeah, speaking of Palin's vision, absolutely. Remember, she said something like she could see Russia from her house. Talk about vision. But no, the woman, anyway, she's just totally unqualified to be vice president or president. All right, and then Gary talked about misusing Bible verses to believe that, it's the role of government to give out welfare and do a whole bunch of other things, which, of course, Scripture says nothing about.
It is wrong, however, to take passages which are designed for the church and for the individual and for families, and then give those and say this is the state's mandated as the power of the sword to take money from people and redistribute wealth.
Well, McCain doesn't believe that at all. McCain voted to take maybe, when it's all said and done, maybe $2 trillion of taxpayers' money to redistribute it to banks, to bail out Wall Street, to bail out this gigantic AIG insurance company, to guarantee a $25 billion loan to the auto industry. McCain has no Christian biblical worldview. All right, when McCain called Obama a socialist, he appeared on Fox News Sunday, and Chris Wallace asked McCain, but aren't you a socialist, sir, because you voted for all those bailouts? Here's the way that went.
Senator, when we talk... is one of the tenets of socialism redistribution of wealth? Not just socialism, a lot of other liberal and left-wing philosophies. Redistribution of the wealth? I don't believe in it. I believe in wealth creation by Joe the Plumber.
But Senator, you voted for the $700 billion bailout that's being used partially to nationalize American banks. Isn't that socialism?
That is reacting to a crisis that's due to greed and excess in Washington, so they can stay in their home. They're bailing out the banks, they're bailing out these institutions.
But you voted for that.
Of course, it was a package that had to be enacted because the economy was about to go into the tank.
So, see, when there's an economic crisis, you have to be a socialist. Why am I laughing? I ought to be weeping. McCain has also said this about what he says is the purpose of government.
But the point is that, of course, that's the reason why we have governments, to help those who need help, who can't help themselves, and when time of crisis, to step in and do what's necessary to preserve the lives and futures of innocent people.
Yeah, to people who can't help themselves, like the largest banks in the country, the largest insurance company. What a ridiculous answer. All right. He's also asked at one point, what does he think, Gary, think about what if Kerry had been president? How would that have been different on the pro-life issue? This is an unbelievable statement, an exceptionally unbelievable statement about Bush.
My suspicions are you wouldn't have heard anything positive coming from the top, and George Bush did, in fact, at least mouth the words of being pro-life. You certainly wouldn't have heard that, from John Kerry.
Wow, can you believe that, to actually say that at least Bush mouthed the words pro-life? And that did what, Gary? That accomplished what? At least that's just disgusting. All right, he also then he says he's not sure about McCain on the abortion issue.
Out there, I don't know how well John McCain has articulated a pro-life platform, but certainly Sarah Palin has. And oftentimes the vice president can bring up an issue much more frequently than, say, the president can, because the vice president's on the road really doing PR work.
Well, that is a totally delusional view on the role of any vice president and how much clout they're going to have with the president. But Palin does not have a pro-life view. Go to our website, theamericanview.com. Put her name in there. You'll see statements by her where she says basically that she's pro-choice. She says that she is personally opposed to abortion. But it's up to, for example, in one interview, she said it was up to the people of Alaska for everybody to determine their own values. She has done nothing as the chief executive officer of Alaska to try to restrict or stop abortions. She could have ordered her attorney general to prosecute abortionists as murderers, to put a yellow tape all around the abortion clinics as a crime scene, and start prosecuting abortionists and the women who murder their babies. She hasn't done that. Even on some of these little regulatory measures like parental consent, there was a couple of those type of regulative bills to regulate abortion. And I talked to the people who were, active in trying to get these things passed. They said that Palin did nothing. Alaska has a Republican governor, Republican House, Republican Senate, and she didn't lift a finger to get those bills passed. I talked to the head of Alaska's Eagle Forum. I talked to the head of Alaska's Right to Life Committee. Both of them said more or less reluctantly, because they are, of course, voting for Bush and Palin, that, well, no, actually, she's done nothing about abortion. So this idea that Palin is pro-life it's false. It's just saying something that's false. And then after invoking the boogeyman, then Gary says something good might actually come out of an Obama presidency.
Well, if we get a Barack Obama administration, I hate to say this, but it actually might stir up people who have been dormant for so long. They really didn't realize how bad this was going to be.
Yeah.
We've had these types of things in the past. I mean, you go back to the book of Romans. I mean, Paul starts off in that first chapter with the homosexual issue. So this isn't anything new. Maybe more and more Christians will pull their kids out of the public schools, we would like that.
Yeah, the book of Romans. Gary needs to go back to the book of Romans. There, God lays out in some detail what is the role of the civil government. It's very limited. It's justice. It's not to house or feed or clothe or educate anybody. In other words, all the things that John McCain wants to do with the government, almost all of them, God says, no, that's not the role of the government. Gary also sees this election, as I do, although in a different way, as an opportunity.
I see this as an opportunity, and we've been talking around here about this as an opportunity for Christians, because I think what's going to happen, the way we position things, people are going to start paying attention to people who have articulated a worldview that has been consistent over the last 20 years or so. We've told you this was coming down the road. You didn't believe us, and it usually takes getting your head kicked in before you finally you decide to do something about it.
Well, certainly some of our people need their head kicked in love, in unconditional love, of course, and not too hard. But, wow, the idea that, we've been saying all this and now all these problems have come about, and Gary's solution, or part of it, is to vote for John McCain. He's been in the Congress, 26, 36, 56, 100 years? He's been part of the mess. He's helped create the mess. And then Gary again, the boogeyman, makes another appearance about Gary's fear. His fear. That's the word he uses.
My fear, of course, is once these laws get into effect, it's almost impossible to get them dislodged. And once you get two guys on the Supreme Court, you're with those people for 20 or 30 years. That's part of the problem. That's why if we're going to really try to change something, you got to change things all the way across the board.
Yeah, well, you're certainly not going to get across-the-board change with John McCain. But fear, that's the word. Gary used it. His fear. He's fearful. Being fearful is not a fruit of the Christian spirit. It is not. We're to fear God and honor God, but he's fearful. The boogeyman has Gary snowed voting for John McCain. Then Gary gives us his strategy.
What's going on here? I think what Christians ought to do, and this is my strategy for the long term here, I think all these Christian organizations need to get together. They need to put together a party within a party.
I have no idea what that means, but I do know that what Christians need to do in the political arena is to obey God Almighty and His Word. That's right. That's what they need to do. They haven't done it. And their dereliction of their Christian duty has resulted in George Bush. All right, we've got to take another break, and we're going to wrap this thing up. Stay with us, please.
Listen now to A Liberty Minute with William Grigg, author of such books as The Gospel of Revolt, Feminism versus the Family, and Freedom on the Altar, the UN's Crusade Against God and Family.
Pensacola, Florida resident Karen Kilpatrick remembers the slaughter of 86 innocent people by the federal government near Waco, Texas on April 19, 1993. 3 years ago, Karen staged a quiet but effective protest by decorating her minivan with several protest slogans, including "Remember the Children of Waco." After learning about the protest, ATF agent Craig Rogner contacted the local police. Describing the matter as an officer safety issue, Agent Rogner requested that the driver be detained for questioning. Shortly thereafter, Karen was stopped and forced out of her vehicle, which was searched without her consent. When Rogner arrived, he berated Karen for an hour, saying her protest offended ATF agents who had friends who died while carrying out the unprovoked attack on Waco's Branch Davidian community. A federal judge has ruled that Karen's detention was illegal and cleared the way for her to sue the ATF. A better solution would be to abolish that unconstitutional agency altogether. Let us take back the liberty wherewith Christ has made us free.
Will Grigg is editor-at-large for The Right Source, an internet news service at rightsourceonline.com. Join us next time for A Liberty Minute with Will Grigg.
All right, welcome back to our final segment here on The American View. The American View, that is the name of the program. I am John Lofton. I am the co-host of this program. And we have a website. You can go to the website, theamericanview.com. I'm going to wrap up this interview that was done recently of Gary DeMar, the head of American Vision. He was interviewed by an OPC pastor, Kevin Swanson. Going to go back. We got two more sound bites. Here's Gary talking about Christian involvement in politics and where we are today.
But we didn't get where we are today in 10 years. We've gotten where we are today over many, 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 many decades. And Christians, if you think about it, Kevin, have been out of this prior to 1976, probably really 1980. Protestant Christians weren't even registering on the political scene after 1925.
Well, where we are today, or one of the places we are today, is that we have George Bush, who is president. And as I say, he has given us, one more time, the most ungodly, unconstitutional, debt-ridden, intrusive government in the history of the universe. And he's supposed to be a conservative. He's supposed to be a Christian. He's supposed to be a compassionate conservative. So that's where we are today. And we got there because Christians, conservative Christians, people who call themselves Christians, helped elect him. They helped elect a person who in the job has given us no Christian policies and seems not to have the slightest idea how Scripture limits the civil government. And so we're going to conclude here by Kevin Swanson, the interviewer. As I say, he's an OPC pastor in Colorado. Name of his program is Generations Radio. And Kevin lays out his own priorities.
To focus
focus your resources behind the guys that you know are going to get out there and fight for life and fight for private property and fight to reduce the size of government and socialism and the monopoly of the public schools of our education. Guys who are just fighters and are able men. First Exodus 18 brings out the importance of able men, and make sure that these guys are tried and true and tested, and get behind them and really put your resources behind the good guys. And I think over time we're going to start winning some races.
Well, God bless Kevin Swanson for, even though it came right at the end of his interview, for mentioning the book of Exodus, which does set forth some of the qualifications, some of God's qualifications for rulers, for those who occupy God-ordained civil government offices. Too bad he didn't earlier press Gary on this question of God's qualifications for public office and whether or not McCain meets them. But I think even Kevin has his priorities somewhat skewed. The life issue, of course, is important. The property issue is important. The big government issue is important. But you could say that these are basically the bread alone issues, because you know where I'm going. I hope you know where I'm going. If you know your Bible, you know where I'm going. What does God say? Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and then these other things, these secondary things, will be added to us. And that's been the problem in a nutshell, folks, with these so-called Christian conservatives. They have not been Christians first. That's a sad thing to have to say, and I also think it's a sin. Yeah, I'll say it. I think it's a sin to be a Republican Party cheerleader before you are a Christian. But that's what's happened. That's what's happened. And to see Gary DeMar, who for decades has had this American Vision ministry, an excellent ministry in many ways. He has distributed much material which ironically refutes his own position in endorsing John McCain. Well, that's what I think. I don't think a Christian can vote for John McCain or for Barack Obama, because I don't, although both of them claim to be Christians. They claim to be Christians. And again, I want to stress, I'm not talking necessarily about their salvation. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that neither man in their respective careers has given any inkling that they have a Christian biblical view of government. In other words, they haven't the slightest idea, I believe, from watching them closely, what it is God requires of them in that job. I mean, John McCain doesn't even want to talk about the religious issue. He is not a member of a church. He has gone to a certain church for years. He's not baptized. I mean, sorry, these men, they don't understand what God requires of them, and therefore they disqualify themselves. And of course, they both demonstrated with a vengeance that they could care less about the United States Constitution, which, of course, they swore to God to uphold. But if you look at their voting records, they've voted for all kinds of stuff that is unconstitutional. That's what I think. Let me know what you think. I don't care how you feel. I would like to know what you think. You can email me, jlof@aol.com. God bless you all, and God does bless us when we obey Him.
Listen now to A Liberty Minute with William Grigg, author of such books as The Gospel of Revolt, Feminism versus the Family, and Freedom on the Altar, the UN's Crusade Against God and Family.
Over the past several years, Pythias Brown of Maplewood, New Jersey, built a thriving business selling digital cameras, laptop computers, MP3 players, and other expensive consumer electronics on eBay. Recently, he put up for sale a sophisticated camera worth nearly $50,000. A CNN employee recognized the camera and called the police. Investigators placed the winning bid and traced the camera back to Brown, an employee of the Transportation Safety Administration who worked as a baggage screener at the Newark airport. For more than a year, Brown had preyed on travelers who are required to submit their baggage for inspection. Brown's behavior is quite common. In the first year of its operation, the TSA was hit with thousands of theft complaints involving everything from jewelry to prescription medications. The TSA instructs flyers to leave their baggage unlocked for security reasons. This does little to enhance air safety, but much to provide a profitable sideline for thieves on the federal payroll. Let us take back the liberty wherewith Christ has made us free.
Will Grigg is editor-at-large for The Right Source, an internet news service at rightsourceonline.com. Join us next time for A Liberty Minute with Will Grigg.